to this session of the Valley of Words 2020. We are in a virtual session and we will be live for interaction at Savoy, Missouri in the November. Our session is named The Identity, Solidarity and Community. And we have a celebrity author, Yashica Dutt, with us.
Thank you so much.
She is the author of this book. It's coming out as Dalit, a memoir, and it was published by Aleph into last year. This book is a revelation, and it's one of the major autobiographies to come in the last few decades. I personally consider it is a fantastic revelation, unlike the other autobiographies. But let me introduce Yashica. She was born in Ajmer in Rajasthan. She's had a great journey in her life. We know her journey in the book. And she's a Stephanian. And then she was a fashion journalist, of course, worked on gender, culture, but initially started as a fashion journalist on a variety of aspects, writing for the Brunch in the Hindustan Times, worked for some time in the Asian Age. And she moved to the Columbia University to do her master's in journalism, which again is a beautiful journey, a tough journey, not an easy journey for her to go through whatever. She has written all this in her book. And she also started, she's the founder of Document of Dalit Discrimination, a Tumblr blog she did. And of late, she has written for the New York Times on an aspect of Dalit discrimination of Dalits in the US. In Cisco, we all know about it. Some of you might be knowing about it. And she has also reviewed a very path-breaking book written by Isabel Wilkerson, a book which was endorsed by Oprah Winfrey. And even Yashica was mentioned in this book called The Cast, and in Foreign Policy, a major website in a journal. Now, this is about Yashica, a great journey, because it's more a beautiful session today because I'm sitting here in Chandigarh in this virtual session, and Yashica is in New York. And look at the differential time, and we will be very keen, Yashica, to go forward with the discussion on your book. And let me start. Of course, this is the usual question, but for the Valley of Words 2020, we would also like all of us to know what made you write this book?
Yeah, first of all, Dr. Vundru, thank you so much for having me here. I am deeply honored. You were one of the first people who reviewed the book when it came out in 2019, and I felt you were accurately able to see what I was trying to convey. You did not look at the book from an outsider lens, but you had deep empathy for my journey, and I really appreciate that. Like you said, this has definitely not been easy, and for Dalits, no matter what class we belong to, it is never easy because the whole system is stacked against us in so many ways. So I really appreciate, and I am so thankful and excited that I am here able to do this session with you. It's quite an honor. So thank you for having me. Thanks for Valley of the Words. Of course, totally. You're an inspiration in the community. And thank you for Valley of the Words for inviting me as well and making all this happen virtually. So coming back to your question about why I decided to write Coming Out as Dalit. Now, there are several reasons, and I've talked about this in the past, but if I may go into a little bit of a detail about why I decided to write Coming Out as Dalit. I grew up, like I've mentioned before, hiding my caste. And my caste was not, even as we know, even within our Dalit communities, there is kind of a descending order of contempt, as Ambedkar has called it. And I'm from the Bhangi caste, which is the manual scavenging caste. And there is so much self-hatred and contempt that the society makes us feel, that there is a deep amount of shame associated to being Bhangi. There was just this almost the untouchability of the mind that I grew up experiencing. And my grandfather was perhaps the first person in his family to have a full-time job, which was with the civil services. And not that that made my life any easier, as you might have read in the book. And the advantage that I did have was the privilege of being educated. And I want to point this out and say that, for Dalits, being educated, being able to touch books, being able to write a book is such a privilege, because like till 3-4 generations ago, they didn't allow us to touch books. They didn't allow us to speak the literary language that was Sanskrit. So I grew up hiding my caste, and I grew up with this deep sense of conflict within my identity about carrying this shame, carrying this trauma, never being able to be comfortable with where I was, always being worried that I was going to be found out or discovered. So what I did, and as many of us who are Dalits were forced to do, is lie about our identity. And people think that it's a simple thing. How does that matter? So what if somebody asked your caste and you had to lie about it? It's a white lie. But it's so much more than that, right? It's about denying who we are. It's about having this sense of shame in who I am. When I'm lying and I'm saying, no, I'm not this horrible, untouchable person that you think I am. I'm actually a Brahmin. I'm actually a Marwari. So I might be able to successfully lie to the person who's asking me that question, but they are not important. What's important is how I feel about myself, and how I feel about myself is not great, because I don't think I'm good enough. And that's what a lot of Dalits have to experience on a daily basis, especially when we pretend to be someone else. And I was still dealing with all these issues when I went to Columbia. One of the reasons I did not write about politics throughout my journalism career in India was because I was worried that if I write about reservation, if I write about politics, then people will find out about my Dalit leanings, or my Dalit sympathies, and I will be questioned. Why are you taking the side of these people, right? Like, this is a question that a lot of journalists face face in newsrooms. So I stayed away from covering politics or anything that I thought mattered to me, stuck to fashion, which I enjoyed. And then I moved to Columbia. But only when I moved here in New York was I able to separate myself from this question of my caste. I didn't have to constantly be answerable. It was like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders, where I didn't have to worry, what happens if someone finds out? Will my job be in jeopardy? Will I be thrown out of my apartment? Will my friends behave differently with me? What kind of life will I have? So I didn't have to worry about this question in New York, and I became a little more comfortable with my Dalit identity. And another thing was being able to go to Columbia, a US-based university, where these questions of identity, these questions of passing as someone else, or the trauma that brings, are very commonly discussed. So in classrooms, when I thought about these questions, and one of the questions I was asked was, what is your identity? What do you identify as? And for the first time, I think in that classroom, I was able to openly say I'm a Dalit person. And most people in my class were not. There was no Indian person. That's another reason I was able to speak so freely, because if there was an Indian person, I knew they would attack me. I knew they would say, well, but reservation, but you already have so many advantages, and I would already be on the back foot, because this hierarchy that we have between castes, it's not in our society only, it's also in our own minds, in the minds of the upper caste person, in the minds of the Dalit community. So I would not be able to speak freely, but I was so grateful that I was surrounded by these vibrant queer African American, Latino, Caucasian students who thought that when I told my story about how I was forced to hide my caste, got angry on my behalf. They, for the first time, through their lens, I recognized that this was not something I needed to be ashamed about. This was something I needed to be angry about. This was something that was being robbed from me, from my identity. I was being made to feel this forced sense of shame when there is no reason. I am not dirty, I am not untouchable, but it's just this prison of the mind that was constructed. And when I was still, and I was dealing with these questions, and I had no contact with the Dalit community, mainly because I didn't want to be found out, the fear and the terror of being discovered as a Bhangi was so acute in my mind that I did not read Ambedkar, that I did not seek any Dalit colleagues. Now there is like this vibrant discourse that we have online. But even back, like let's say in 2015, 2016, I was filled with fear. What would happen? And I just want to preface, there are so many of us, so many Dalits like yourself, and many other people who are inspiring and who continue living these lives filled with pride, filled with, so much confidence in where they come from. But for many of us, that's just simply not possible, especially if you come from castes that are absolutely at the bottom of the system. So when at the same time, I was dealing with all these questions, and I happened to read Rohit Vemula's last letter. Yeah. Till then, I hadn't read any Dalit person writing in English. Like I've said before, of course that exists, but I didn't know. I hadn't read any Dalit person who I could relate to on so many levels. And his last letter seemed like an arm reaching out, not for help, but to salvage me. Because, and I know like a lot of people who have listened to me speak about that might be wondering that if that's how I really feel, is that true? But it is, because it had such a deep and powerful impact on me. His mother...
Last letter was very powerful. It moved everybody in the country. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there in New York, it touched you.
It touched me because Mrs. Radhika Vemula had had such a difficult life. And in her spirit, I saw my own mother, who had moved earth and mountains to make sure I got the education that she thought I deserved, that she thought I needed to be able to, at least on the face of it, transcend my caste. And Rohit, despite all of that, was not hiding his identity. He was living it out with pride. He was being open with it. And look at the price he had to pay. So that all these factors combined was extremely moving for me at so many levels. And I realized I made it to Colombia. I made it so far. I had a relatively, relatively safe life because I didn't talk about my caste. So I managed to escape all these open discriminations. What am I doing with all this so-called privilege that I have acquired? So I decided that I...
Stop you here. Yashica, in your book, you felt St. Stephen's is a very important milestone in your life. You really wanted to go to Stephen's. First, let me know why you wanted to go to Stephen's. And in your book, you said that that was a very crucial moment where your mother had to decide, you and your mother had to decide whether you have to seek reservation or not. What is that point in time? Let us know about it.
Sure. So Stephen's, like you mentioned, was such a path-breaking moment for me. And even now, I've graduated from college in 2007. It's been a few years, but even now when I look back, I always wonder just how much of my life has been different, because I was able to go into this institution that we look at as this epitome of class and upper caste. If you go to St. Stephen's College, who are the alumni that comes out from there? Shashi Tharoor, Barkha Dutt, all these illustrious names.
Different
you
class.
Associate,
yeah,
absolutely. You associate them with being high class and high caste. So when I was looking at colleges, I wanted to go into the college that would help me escape the best out of all colleges. I could have gone to Hindu, I could have gone to, which is right across the road, or any other college. But the more I found out, the more I understood that there was so much student level university politics in all those colleges. And St. Stephen's didn't have that. Even beyond the prestige and the privilege that is acquired, I also didn't want to expose myself to any kind of politics, because I knew, all these student elections are run on the basis of caste. They're run on the lines of caste. So I decided that Stephen's was, it was going to be St. Stephen's for me. And I got through Miranda House as well. I got through English honors, which is the course I wanted. But I decided to go to St. Stephen's because I knew that being among these people who are considered high class and high caste, I will be able to mask myself more.
But you went with your caste tag there. you went on a reservation there. So how
So
was it
that is
like?
what I'm
How was it
that's
like?
what I'm coming to. It was a very difficult and strange sort of a conclusion to make for my mom and I. We were at this moment, the forms were being filled, and I was just with my mother, and she said, yeah, fill for reservation, check SC. Until then, I'd never availed reservation because, like many students, I was told that if you use reservation, that means you're not good enough yourself. It's a crutch. And be reminded that only 2 generations in my family have had any kind of education, and still I'm being filled with this myth that I don't, it's something that's bad for me. It's something that's going to make me look weak and not as smart. So I didn't want to do it, but my mom said, well, we cannot afford this, and you need reservation because you need scholarship benefits. You might have the marks to be able to get there yourself, but we need the money, because at that time we just didn't have any kind of money. And then it was really difficult, and I did use a reservation. And even if I did not have the marks, I should have used it, because there is no shame in using this kind of affirmative action policy that is instituted, because families like even mine have not had access to the same kind of privilege that upper caste families have had for generations. And I'm not talking about poverty. Many upper caste families are poor, but they're not simply held back because of what their caste is. So we decided to avail reservation, and I just had to live that first year in hiding, because when the results come out, if you're SC, ST, they put you in that category at the bottom. And then my classmates would wonder, Yashica is SC? How is that possible? She doesn't look like it.
She doesn't
And
look
I
like
would,
it. Yeah.
of course, I done too good a job of not looking, apparently not looking Dalit. So that, it was a difficult time. And even in college, I lived in constant fear that what happens if they ask me which SC. So I was also like, okay, maybe if they ask me, I'll say Chamar. Like I would still not say Bhangi. Like maybe if they ask me, I'll be like, I'm just one level below OBC. I'm not even SC. I'm actually OBC. Like I've already had these ideas in my mind that I was going to tell them. Nobody could find out that I was actually from a manual scavenging caste.
In fact, I look at your book of late, apart from my first review, it's a major sociological discourse on how castes are placed in this country. And as you said, one level OBC, okay, below that, you're an SC. Within SC, there are subdivisions. But what is that thing that you must have faced during your Stephen's time? Did anything hit you that hard during your Stephenian journey as a caste that must have, because you entered with reservation? Was there any incident like that?
There were all the time there were incidents. Like I
Mhm.
said, of course, Stephanians or St. Stephen's is not known for its politics, but it's definitely known for this issue of reservation, right? And when we were applying at that time, and I'm sure even now, everybody wanted to do an MBA, everybody wanted to take the CAT exam, and this whole discourse was, and there was a colleague of mine who at this time is doing extremely well. He is also from the SC category. He was my batchmate, and he is in the police right now and doing
Mhm.
excellent work. And both of us, I mean, I was hiding. He kind of wasn't. And they said, well, तुम्हारे को पढ़ने की क्या जरूरत है? Why do you have to study? You will get an admission just like that. You have a reserved category. And he was the kind of person who could stand up to that. And, I don't know his exact life history, but he was somehow able to give back to those people. When I was sitting at the same table and listening to them, I would just be shrinking in fear from inside. That what if these people find out that I'm also SC? Or maybe if they found out, why aren't they speaking about it? Or have they forgotten because I don't look Dalit? Like I would constantly, this question would be there in my mind, especially when this discussion about applying for colleges and giving these competitive exams, going to IITs and IIMs would come up. And even in class, I remember one of my professors who told me that I was eating another person's deserved worthy seat. And I don't know what that remark was about. I mean, he could clearly see I was from an SC background, and this professor was, and from an IIT background himself, is really good at what he does, but did not think that I deserved to be there for whatever reasons he thought so. And he told me that many times in class, except I had by then become very used to not caring about these remarks. So I was able to brush it off. Yeah.
Yashica, see, look at when we look at your journey, it's a tough journey, it's a struggle. But look where you are. You went all the way to Columbia, where Dr. B.R. Ambedkar went. And your revelation to come out as an individual also happened in Columbia, the way Columbia shaped Dr. Ambedkar in a major way. But when you were introduced to Ambedkar, what was your feeling towards that journey of Dr. Ambedkar, his ideas, his ideology? And after you first read Dr. Ambedkar, where are you with him? And what is that Ambedkarite journey or is a Dalit journey till now where you are?
I grew up with Ambedkar all around me. There is no way that you can be an educated, somewhat educated person who's also Dalit and not know who Ambedkar is. I saw his photos everywhere not everywhere in my house, but everywhere I went, relatives' house. Some of them were also Buddhists. So I knew who Dr. Ambedkar was, and I knew his contribution to our lives in a sort of a, top of the line way. But I really didn't know how deeply he had affected my personal life. And I know a lot of Dalits say that, but while that's true, is because he was the first person to take this kind of stand. I mean, not the first person. There's been Periyar and many others before him, but the way he was able to have an impact on our immediate lives just with the affirmation action policy that he instituted in terms of reservation was a huge leg up. Without that, my family and myself probably would be still stuck in the manual scavenging jobs. There would be no way for us to come out. And when I read Ambedkar for the first time, and I've always been honest about this, is when I started researching the book. I had never read any book by Ambedkar before that because I just didn't think that kind of politics was for me. And I know a lot of Dalits like myself who feel that that is only a certain kind of politics and Ambedkar is not accessible. Maybe because we get found out. Like on the documents of Dalit discrimination, I got so many letters from people who said, we have kept away from Ambedkar just like you, because people say, Tum Ambedkar wale ho, you are the Ambedkar guys. They use that as a discrimination. That's how casteism has mutated and evolved now. So when I read Ambedkar for the first time, it was like somebody came in and opened the doors in my brain, and the light was able to come in. Suddenly all these constructed ideas that I had created around me, that caste is a real thing, Brahmins are above you, Dalits are below, these kind of assumptions just started falling like curtains. Just it was I would say it was kind of amazing how when I read the first few books, especially Annihilation of Caste, I realized that I didn't have to come from approach this value system on the back foot. I don't have to be like, well, okay, can you please make us Hindus and let us enter the temples? No, it was about, you either give me complete equality or nothing. And that kind of ideology where you accept nothing short of equality, which is not what Swami Vivekananda and others and all these reformers were giving you. They were just giving you these little crumbs that, you still be subservient to us and we will lord over you in some way or the other, and you can maybe be included at the table. No, Ambedkar said, I am either equal to you or I'm nothing to you. And that changed my life completely. That made me look at myself in a completely different way than when I did earlier. And I realized that, yes, absolute equality of human beings, absolute equality of Dalits is what really matters, and is what something that we all should be striving for, nothing less. No like crumbs, no a seat at the foot of the table. I'm either there as your equal or I'm not.
Okay, you are talking about now Ambedkarite politics, you are leaning towards that, what you said just now, which you didn't actually really do in the North Campus in Delhi. Do you regret looking back that, okay, you were not part of that Ambedkarite politics on campus? What do you like to say about it?
I don't think I have any regrets. And I would like to say to everybody who's Dalit and who's listening, don't have any regrets about who you are. This is your journey as a person. This was my journey. It took me the time it took to get here. Maybe if I got into Ambedkarite politics at a time when I still had so much shame about being a Bhangi person, I would not have been able to be as effective. I needed to have been evolved in a way that I was confident enough to reveal my identity. And that's why I don't feel that sometimes there is a pressure from other Dalit folks on Dalits who say, why do you have to hide yourself? Have the confidence. It's not so simple. I think everybody really has our own journeys, and there are valid reasons because the society makes us feel less than. It makes us feel lower. So if we have to do whatever we have to do to survive, and I did what I had to survive. And now when I'm able to speak out, my voice carries the weight of all those years of history. So now I'm able to speak out more powerfully. And I would say that to every Dalit person who is forced to hide their caste, don't feel shame. We are doing whatever we need to do to survive in this system that was not meant for us. So this is your time, claim it. It's fine. You will come to Ambedkarite politics when you do, but definitely read Ambedkar. Whether you reveal your caste or not, make sure that you read his work, read his ideas.
That's very well said. But again, then looking at caste, Yashica, you have now seen the entire span of caste, including the journalistic spaces. What do you think about caste in urban India? Is it going down? And the second aspect is about in the education spaces, university spaces, the way Rohit Vemla had to face it. What do you think? What is happening to that?
Yeah, so caste in urban India has not gone anywhere. Like these, how do we call them? These monsters like caste, like race. They don't disappear. They simply mutate over time. They change their form. They look different. In rural areas, caste is about land conflict. Caste is about untouchability, which is so direct that if you use the same source of water, then you will be lynched to death. That is how caste looks like in rural areas. But in urban areas, caste looks different. All our manual scavengers who clean the manholes and clean our bathrooms are in urban areas. They are also a part of the urban reality. Just because they don't belong to a certain class that we identify with does not make them any less urban. Or the person who comes in, I've talked about this before, who comes and collects our garbage, how we treat them. We refuse to touch them. Sometimes they ask for water. Many people say, oh, give them water in a different glass. Or we just, when we give them whatever we want to give them as gifts for Diwali, I'm not even going to, say how people actually treat people who work for us in our homes. It's another issue, but those aspects of caste that operate in our daily life are also a part of urban reality. And of course, our interpersonal relationships. Look at all the corporates that are around us. Look at all these workspaces. Where are the Dalits who are leading those workplaces? Where are the Dalits who are administrators? There is always a gap on how much success we are allowed to have. So those realities of caste and how it manifests also exists in an urban area. It's not good enough to say just because we are not dying with a lynching that it's okay. I don't have to die to prove that caste exists. It already does. Our lives are a living and breathing example of how caste is allowed to thrive in urban areas, and especially in the education sector. It has not at all, there is no sign of loosening of the grip of superiority. In fact, this is like the stronger gasp of caste superiority. Now when Dalits like myself, or many of us, or like the young Dalit people who are now really open about their identity, when we are asserting ourselves,
Yes.
caste superiority is now launching a backlash about how dare you speak. And that kind of backlash is happening in university spaces as well. We know of incidents where professors in colleges like AIMS and IITs actively discriminate against Dalit students. They don't give them marks. They are given less marks in oral examinations and practical examinations. PhD students who are Dalits have the hardest time finding a thesis advisor. They constantly made to feel less than. So if that is not a manifestation of caste, if that is not a manifestation of inequality, then what is? And like I said earlier, in rural areas, caste is a different experience, but that does not mean its intensity is reduced in any way in urban areas as well.
And Yashica, now caste, we have found caste in such a dangerous manner in the Cisco company, where the Indians have carried their caste and were discriminating a Dalit employee in the US. All of them are in California or wherever they are, and you wrote about it. And how do you think that how caste plays outside the country, outside India, in the US where you are?
Absolutely. And I just want to go back to Ambedkar again. He said that Indians will carry castes wherever they go. It's a paraphrase of his actual quote. And that's totally accurate. I mean, why would a Brahmin person who carries so much of superiority in their identity suddenly let it go because they're moving into the US? Right? And especially in the 90s, when we saw this tech boom and we got familiarized with the idea of so many Indians moving there, Indians also decided to stick in their own communities. And when there are 5 Indians, there's going to be a question about what your caste
What
is.
is the caste?
There is, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just impossible to escape that. And, there are horrific experiences that I've learned about, that people have talked about in the US, where they would try and pat your back and see if you're wearing the thread, just to see if the thread is there. If the thread is not there, then they'll try and find the thread, the Brahmin thread that they wear, whatever it's called, Janeil. And otherwise they'll say, oh, why don't we have a pool party? Why don't you come? If they can't locate that. So when you take off your shirt, if you're a man, you take off your shirt, you can actually see the thread. So that's just one way. Or they will just be like, where are you from? No, but where are you really from? And then they will get to the question of what your caste is. So it's not surprising that Indians have moved to the United States and formed these groups where they're actively practicing caste discrimination.
So
Whether it's through the temple.
Why do you think they're doing that? Why do you think they still hang on to their caste? Is it because of the matrimonial? Is it the marriage? Or they don't want to mingle as an Indian community? They will be voting together probably in the election in few days. Why do you think your experience? Let me know. Yeah.
It's very simple. It's about power. Brahmins and upper caste people have this, they know they have this tremendous amount of power. And when they come here and they have these 20 Indians, there is constantly this scuffle to find out who's at the top and who's at the bottom. They want to establish this hierarchy almost immediately, because like I mentioned earlier, the mind doesn't change. Just because you cross the 7 seas does not mean you left your caste behind. You didn't become a different person. You're still who you are. And when you see other Indians, you want to know if I'm better than them or if I'm worse than them. And the only way for Indians or Indian societies to measure that is through caste. So that's why there's a very simple reason to establish caste superiority, to establish caste power, to consolidate more power. If you look at who the Indian Americans in the United States are, who are doing that well, especially if they're Hindus, mostly they're Brahmins. And how did you think that happened? That happened because caste networks operate even here. Oh, you're a Brahmin person? I'll give you a promotion. Why don't you join this company? Or you want to stay for 5 more years? Let me give you the H-1B visa and make sure that our Brahmins are definitely a part of this country. That's how 96 or 97% of the Indian American population in the US is largely upper caste, when they don't even represent that population in India. How is that happening? Because it shows who has access to resources, who has the money to come to the US, who has the money to stay in the US, who's getting support. These are all support networks that are run on the basis of caste, just so that that kind of power can be consolidated. It's very simple. Indians might look like a monolith, but we are always carrying a caste with us.
Now that you are in the US, do you see any similarity of the Dalit movement in India and the Black movement? But of course, there are two parallel movements. But where do you think there are any meeting lines over there? And as an individual, are you, of course, from your journalistic journey, that's your prime focus in the US, are you looking at any of these movements very closely, the Black movement or the Dalit comparatively?
Absolutely. And there's such natural alliances between the civil rights movement, between the Black Lives Matter movement, and between the Dalit movement, because ultimately we are all oppressed people. We are all oppressed people who are trying to create spaces for ourselves in a system just so we can breathe, just so we can be alive, just so we can have and enjoy the same kind of life that everybody else does. So of course, there have been, so many meeting points between Ambedkar and W.E.B. Du Bois. There was this well-known conversation that happened back in the day, or between how Dalit Panthers were inspired by Black Panthers during the civil rights movement. And even now, we've been seeing this hashtag Dalit Lives Matter, which is directly based on the Black Lives Matter hashtag. And the Black Lives Matter movement is just about providing visibility to the cause of how Black people are forced to live their lives in this country. So of course, when we as Dalits see that there are oppressed people in another part of the world who are able to stand up for their rights, that is so very inspiring. There is so much that we can learn from this. And especially my personal feelings, I've been to so many Black Lives Matter protests, even over the summer. And back when I moved here in 2014, 2015, it was just such a space of solidarity and community, and it felt so safe. I didn't feel like I was going to be pointed out and said, you don't belong here because you are Dalit. In fact, I felt that I belong there more because I understand at some level what it is like to undergo through that kind of suffering. And a lot of my own...
Ms.
Yeah.
Yashica, you are perfectly poised, having a very deep insight into the Black movement and having known the entire Dalit movement. So we are ending our discussion till now, and we'll wait for the viewers' questions. But before that, are we looking at Yashica coming out with another revelation? Are you looking at any area which was as we wait?
Definitely. Like, I'm a journalist, so I want to continue doing that work. I want to continue talking about Dalit narratives all over the world. I want, and my hope is that, caste is recognized on the global scale as the horrific reality it is, that it's recognized on the same scale as race. And that's what I want to continue doing. As far as another book is concerned, I'm sure there will be a time for that. But as of now, I'm focusing on telling more Dalit stories on an international platform.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Yashica. We wait for the viewers' questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.